So we had another event from Nintendo today around the Switch 2 after their big direct yesterday that, when it ended, certainly left a lot of people confused, and we've pretty much been scrambling since then to figure out a lot of the stuff for ourselves, especially when it comes to pricing and what games are actually on the cartridges, and it's sort of been all over the place, which I'll get to a point about Nintendo a bit later that's really annoyed me so far since this direct happened. But there does seem to be confusion around price point for a certain game and a ton of backlash, so much so that there was the Treehouse that happened, and it did not go well for Nintendo at all. So much so that many outlets actually wrote about what was being said in the live chat for this thing. And we're going to go over all of that here today. So if you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. So first, let's solve one point here, something that's been going around. People seem confused, or at times maybe just pushing information that doesn't seem to be correct. Now, that has to do with Mario Kart World. It seems like many people believe that the game is $90, just in the US. I keep seeing this going around. It's $90 physically, and that it's cheaper digitally. But at this time, Mario Kart World, as there are many press releases that have been pushed out there, it's just $80 digitally and physically. Trust me, in the US it is. And I'm not really sure why a lot of people believe right now that I see online that $90 is somehow involved with that. I think it started because there was an article or report that was written by Insider Gaming that was citing a listing from a different region, and they then took it maybe and just pushed it at, I think $90 was in the headline. Either way, it spun out of control, but Mario Kart World, $80 physically, $80 digitally in the US. That said, it's not the case everywhere. And I think it's important to note that this is usually how it works out. Different regions have different pricings, and at times, it's crazy to hear what some people have to pay in different parts of the world compared to the US for these games. So one example in this case, this is over on VGC, and they did confirm with Nintendo that Mario Kart World will cost, as I mentioned, $80 in the US, or £75 for a physical copy. The digital version will be cheaper in the UK, and they have that at £67, basically. All right. So when I see that, I go, okay, that's where that part comes from, right? Where they're like, okay, it's different pricing in terms of physically versus digitally, and this is an issue. Nintendo hasn't provided an explanation for the discrepancy in prices at all. And that, I think, is one of the more frustrating things right now that is leading to a lot of confusion around pricing. Nintendo does not seem to want to talk about pricing at all. And they just kind of leave it for the internet and consumers try to figure out on their own. And it is very spotty. Like, there are images of Walmart listings going around that just look like pricing is all over the place. Like, really, it's anyone's guess as to what something like Final Fantasy VII Integrate is going to cost. I'd like to think that ends up being, we'll say, a $60 game, but there's a good chance it won't even be on the cartridge, which is another thing we're dealing with. Some games, apparently like Cyberpunk, are going to use a 64 gigabyte cartridge. The entire thing will be there. But then we hear Elden Ring is going to be a game key. It's like, all right, so who knows what you're going to get when you go and buy it at retail at this point. So a lot of things Nintendo really needs to clear up, I believe, with this whole thing right now. It's just, and the system comes out in 2 months. So they might want to get on that soon. It just seems like they were in a rush to get out of that direct and forgot that there was a whole section about pricing, and I don't know. Like, when you look at the current Switch, when they did that presentation, I mean, they flashed the pricing on screen. They mentioned region free. They went really in depth about all of these things that were more consumer facing when you actually go to buy the device. So I don't know. It was weird. They talked quite a bit about the technical side of the Switch 2 and not much about what matters when you get to the register to actually get the system. Okay, so with that at least clear, right now, as far as I've seen, we have one $80 game, and that's Mario Kart World. There are bundles out there for these like Switch 2 enhanced versions where it's like, oh, it's $60 the base because we never lowered the price on this game, which is Nintendo. They really don't. And then there's $10 or $20 on top for the DLC that we're adding with the enhancements. And that's a whole thing on its own when it comes to having to pay for the enhancements. So we have like Mario Party Jamboree is $80 with this quote unquote 60-20 bundle. As one of them. I think Kirby is same thing. So that is, again, poor messaging from Nintendo because it's an $80 game. So it's right now the only new title that's 80 is Mario Kart World. Okay, got that all cleared up. Okay, so from there though, because of all this stuff that's going around right now with Nintendo, they have their Treehouse, which I went through, and I'm jumping around checking these things out, and there are some really cool things happening there. The GameCube section was awesome. Like, some of those GameCube games look great, but the entire time, especially when they showed Mario Kart World, the chat was a little preoccupied. So this is over on Nintendo Life, and as I mentioned, many places decided to cover this. Drop the price, screamed Nintendo fans during Nintendo's Treehouse live broadcast. And I noticed this the entire time. The chat, was getting crushed. Drop the price, like over and over, got the big exclamation yield sign looking things there. Lower the price of the games, drop the price. Whenever Mario Kart was there, it was all about this. But there were other ones like what's funny is I know Mario Kart World is like the egregious one for a lot of people because they have now set the mark for $80. And we go, oh, of course, it just gets more and more expensive. But the one that I still like look at and go, really? Is that as the welcome tour? Because when it was being shown, I think many of us thought it was a pack-in. It was an interactive manual. And then we come to find out, there's word going around right now that the game is like $10 or $15, or the interactive manual, whatever, the World Welcome Tour. And in my mind, I'm like, do you really need to charge $10 or $15 for that? Like, it seems weird to not just have that as a pack-in to add more perceived value to the system when you first turn it on, especially since it walks you through how to use the system and all the extra features. And it's pretty cool. It seems like a fun little thing like Astro's Playroom. So now it's kind of that sense of, wait, I have to pay for the instruction manual, kind of. It's felt like a lot of nickel and diming. So, I don't necessarily disagree with the sentiment when I see this. It's like, oh yeah, that'd be great if they dropped the price, wouldn't it? Nintendo, however, as many of us know at this point, are extremely stubborn. So much so that it's kind of rubbed off on people to where if they decide to do something that's not great for consumers, like, I don't know, shutting down the eShop for the Wii U and the 3DS, when they announced that, for example, a lot of people were like, it's too bad, but what are we going to do? Like, that was kind of it. Wow, Nintendo really has just worn people down with how stubborn they are to just be like, well, that's it. What are you going to do? And in a way, they're not necessarily wrong to save that energy, because Nintendo really is like that when it comes to, I'll say, like, online pushback, or just like a lot of the loud, a lot of the noise that happens online. Typically, they put their head down and they go forward, and that's kind of it. But here's the thing. They have actually gone through situations, one in particular that's like infamous, where they thought they had the price right, and the market immediately pushed back on it, and Nintendo had to take drastic measures. So, again, people are saying we can't afford $90 for Mario Kart. Good news is $80. Okay, in the U.S., sure. But when I see this dollar sign, I'm like, okay, well, it's 80. But that out of the way, Nintendo had to do this with the 3DS. And I think this was an interesting situation and one to bring up for this, because it actually came down to sales, initial sales that happened. So, like, for example, here, this was after their financial briefing back then in 2011. If you remember, the 3DS launched earlier in the year, so we got an earlier look at it. But we found out that they had sold 710,000 in 3 months. And that's not great for a new handheld or new system in general. They were coming off of the tremendous success of the DS Lite, and they're like, whoa, this $250 handheld, maybe it is too expensive. And then, of course, their DS sales were down as well because they were trying to get people to move to the 3DS. The Wii sales were down. Everything was kind of just down for Nintendo. And right now, if you think about it, they have one system. They technically have the Switch, but that's slowed to a crawl in terms of sales. So, sure, if people come together and say we're not buying the Switch 2, that could get Nintendo to react similar to what they did with the 3DS, where it was the 3DS only went on sale earlier this year for $250, but as of August 12th, it'll be slashed all the way down to $169.99, $170. They took $80 off of that. That's quite a bit. Now, what they decided to do was hand out, they made like ambassador systems where they would give you, like they had 10 Game Boy Advance Virtual Console games, for example, that they threw on there, NES games, stuff like that. So they did at least try to make it up to the people who spent that money immediately, early adopters. Now, would the Switch 2 go through this? Because I have seen people say, hey, just boycott the system and then not buy it. Look, here's the thing. I think I'm going to say the first year of the Switch 2, I think it's kind of decided already. As weird as that sounds, I think the Switch 2 will have zero problem selling in the first year that it's on the market. I think it'll sell out. I think basically however many Nintendo ships will move off the shelves, if not necessarily just by regular people buying it, but also resellers and scalpers trying to pick them up and then flip them. All of that I think is basically accounted for. The years that I'm more interested in right now in terms of like sales for the system would be year 2 and 3. Because when I see the pricing that they have right now, the $450 system in the realm of PC handhelds with the specifications that they've named, the screen, the NVIDIA chip that NVIDIA put out a press release, and it does sound quite impressive with what they've jammed into it. It's actually priced about right. Technically, it's a bit below what the market value is currently. If you look at what Asus puts out and what Lenovo puts out and MSI, it's actually pretty good. Especially since it comes to the dock and stuff. Those handhelds, you buy a dock separately. You get the idea there. So my thing is, coming off of the Switch, one of its strong suits is it's an affordable family system, so much so that they got the Switch Lite out at $200, which much easier to buy multiple systems, say, at holiday when you're trying to do gifts. It's like, oh, you have 2 kids. Well, guess what? You get 2 Switch Lites at $400 total, and then you get a $50 game and a $50 game. Wow, that's the price of the then $500, we'll say, PS5. It makes sense for them to go that route, give each kid their own system and a game. And it's like, boom, Christmas taken care of, or something like that. So this is a bit different. Like, me personally, I'm not looking at this and going, oh, well, yeah, this is obviously what I would get for the kids at Christmas time. It's like, no, it's $450. And they're probably going to eventually break it or something. Like, would you really trust an 8 or 9 or whatever year old with this Switch 2? And then they're like, oh, we want all these games. And oh, wait, they're $70 and $80 constantly. Not so much. So I almost wonder if the price point that Nintendo has currently would end up pricing out a large portion of the current Switch audience, like the younger audience. And in a way, that is the audience that would kind of work to keep momentum going after year 1, when the early adopters, that more enthusiast buyers that are like, yeah, well, I wish it was 600 with all the really cool specifications in there. Once they're kind of taken care of and they have their system, will the mainstream step in with the audience that is more inclined to buy around the holiday season for a younger audience, the kids and stuff? And I just don't think that's there right now. So Nintendo would probably have to figure something out when it comes to the price point, like 2 years in. Maybe that's with a Switch 2 Lite, and they figure it out and they get this thing down to, it sounds weird, but down to $350, down to that OLED model. So that's their challenge right now. But I think currently they're probably not going to go through this 3DS situation because they learned this quickly, like in the first 6 months or something. Oh, okay, we're dropping the price. Will that happen with the Switch 2? I wouldn't count on it, but hey, we'll see. A couple of months, the system will be out, and we'll find out how sales are very quickly from Famitsu sales charts or Circana. There's a lot of ways we can at least find out if they're selling out of their consoles, and then we'll have an idea as to Nintendo and if they have to react quicker than they were thinking they'd have to. So interesting stuff. Let me know what you guys think about this down below, especially if you were someone who tuned into the Treehouse. Were you surprised to see some of the pushback that was happening there in that chat? Because it was constant and it was just fully spammed. I'm a little surprised they left it on as long as they did, and we'll see if they leave it on tomorrow for another outing with the Treehouse. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.